There was a girl named Mira, a quiet 14-year-old who blended so easily into the background that most people barely remembered she was in the room. She wasn't invisible because she wanted to be, but because she had learned over time that silence was easier than trying to match the noise of others. At school, her teachers considered her polite and hardworking, but none of them had any clue about the world she carried inside her. Her classmates saw her as the girl who always sat near the window, writing notes in small handwriting and rarely joining conversations. Nobody ever asked her what she liked, what she cared about, or even what she dreamed of. Mira lived with her mother in a small house at the edge of the town. The place wasn't fancy. 2 tiny rooms, a worn-out sofa, and an old wooden table, but it was always clean and warm. Her mother worked long hours at a tailor shop, stitching clothes for customers who needed them urgently and often argued over prices. Mira knew her mother worked hard, and she never complained when she came home tired. Mira always tried to help where she could, cooking simple meals or washing dishes so her mother wouldn't have to. But there was one thing in that small home that meant more to Mira than anything else. An old electronic keyboard placed against the wall, right under a flickering light bulb. Some of the keys didn't work. The sound wasn't the best. Sometimes it crackled. But to Mira, it was the most precious thing in the world. It had belonged to her grandfather, who used to play soft melodies on it in the evenings when she was very young. After he passed away, the keyboard fell silent, until Mira, at the age of 9, timidly touched it again. She remembered how it felt, the first time her fingers pressed down. She remembered how the sound filled the quiet room and made her feel something she couldn't describe back then. It was like the world made sense for a moment, like the noise in her head went quiet. From then on, she would play whenever she could, copying melodies she heard on TV or online. Over the years she taught herself, slowly learning more difficult techniques, staying up late when her mother was asleep so she wouldn't disturb anyone. But nobody in school knew she could play. She never told them. She was shy, yes, but that wasn't the only reason. Mira feared that if she revealed something she cared about deeply, people might laugh, criticize, or judge her the same way they judged everything else. Keeping it to herself felt safer. One afternoon, in her school's music class, the teacher announced that their class would have a small performance day the following week. Each student needed to play something on the piano. Nothing too hard, just a short tune to show what they had learned. The announcement filled the room with chatter. Some students groaned. Others instantly started choosing songs. A few rolled their eyes, already planning to treat the assignment like a joke. But Mira sat quietly, her stomach tightening as she realized she had no choice but to participate. She hoped the teacher wouldn't call on her right away. But teachers always seemed to notice Mira when she didn't want attention. "What about you?" the teacher said, turning toward her. "What will you play?" Mira's voice came out softer than she intended. Just a simple tune. Several students turned their heads as soon as they heard her speak. Mira wasn't used to people looking at her, and she immediately lowered her eyes. A couple of kids in the back whispered to each other, and Mira already knew what they were thinking. They assumed she didn't know anything beyond the basics, that she was just saying simple because she had nothing better. The teacher gave her an approving nod, as if she were a child choosing the easiest option. "Good," the teacher said. "Simple is safe. Keep it short so we can move quickly." Mira nodded even though a part of her felt a small sting in her chest. The teacher didn't say anything mean, but the tone made her feel underestimated. It wasn't new. People often assumed Mira couldn't do much. They saw her silence as a sign of weakness or lack of ability. On the walk home from school, Mira replayed the moment in her mind. The whispers, the glances, the teacher's tone. It all stuck with her. She wasn't angry. She rarely ever let herself get angry, but she felt a quiet sadness. She had spent years practicing, learning things far beyond what her classmates even knew existed. Her fingers knew how to move across the piano with speed and emotion, like they had stories to tell. She had spent nights studying the techniques of great musicians, copying their movements from videos, learning to feel the music rather than just play it. But in school, she was still the quiet girl with simple skills. When she arrived home, her mother was preparing tea. The smell of cardamom filled the small kitchen. Her mother smiled when Mira walked in. "You look tired," she said gently. Mira shrugged. "Just school." Her mother could always read her. "Something happened?" "No," Mira said softly. "We just have a performance next week." "Oh? And what will you play?" "A simple tune," Mira answered again. But this time the words felt heavier. Her mother raised an eyebrow. "Why only simple?" Mira hesitated. "Because that's what they expect." Her mother walked over to her and put a hand on her shoulder. "What other people expect is not your limit, Mira." Hearing that made Myra's eyes sting a little. Her mother always had a way of making her feel understood. Mira nodded and went to her small room, the space she used for homework, drawing, daydreaming, and of course practicing piano. She sat at the keyboard, running her fingers over the broken keys. The soft hum of the machine filled the room as it turned on. Mira hesitated for a moment, thinking about the performance. She could play something simple and get it over with. Or, she closed her eyes. A melody she had been practicing for months began to float into her mind. It wasn't simple. It wasn't safe. It wasn't short. It was fiery, fast, full of emotion. Something that needed confidence, control, and passion. Something she had poured her heart into. She started playing. The notes came out strong, filling the small room like bright flames. Her hands moved quickly, almost dancing. She felt the music rise and fall, powerful and alive. Every time she played this piece, it felt like she could breathe deeper, think clearer, and become more herself. Her mother leaned on the doorway, listening with a soft smile. She had heard Mira play many times, but each time it reminded her how special her daughter truly was. She wished the world could see what she saw. When Mira finished, she looked down at her hands. She wasn't breathing heavily, but she felt her heart beating fast. She knew she could play the fiery piece at school. She knew she had the ability. The question was, did she have the courage? The next morning, on her way to school, she saw the music hall where the performance would take place. She imagined herself walking to the piano. She imagined the whole room watching her. She imagined the surprise on their faces if she played the fiery piece. Just thinking about it made her nervous, and yet strangely excited. During music class, her classmates were practicing their own choices. Most were doing short, familiar songs, easy melodies, nothing risky, nothing extraordinary. Mira sat quietly, listening. A couple of kids looked at her and whispered again, probably thinking she would do something basic. She didn't say anything to defend herself. She didn't need to. The music in her heart spoke louder than anything her voice could say. When the teacher passed by her desk, they smiled and said, "Don't worry, Mira. Simple is fine. We're not expecting much. Just do your best with something small." Mira nodded politely, but inside, something shifted. Not because of the words themselves, but because of the tone behind them. The tone that said, "You're not capable of more." She didn't feel angry. Instead, she felt something she rarely felt, determination. That night at home, she played the fiery piece again, and again, and again. Not because she needed practice, but because she needed clarity. Her mother watched from the kitchen, sensing something was different this time. There was strength in Myra's playing, confidence, purpose. When she finished, her mother asked softly, "Are you thinking of playing that at school?" Mira looked at her. "I don't know." Her mother nodded. "Play what feels true, not what feels safe." Mira sat on the floor beside the keyboard, hugging her knees. What if they laugh? What if I mess up? Her mother sat beside her. People laugh when they don't understand someone's talent. But the moment they see it clearly, laughter stops. Mira listened carefully. She looked at her hands again. The same hands that had learned from broken keys and online videos. The same hands that played her feelings better than her words ever could. Maybe she could show them. As she lay in bed that night, she thought about the moment she would sit at the piano in front of everyone. She imagined the silence before the music began. She imagined the shock when her fingers moved faster than they expected. She imagined, for once, being seen not as the quiet girl, but as someone capable of something breathtaking. She didn't know yet what choice she would make. But one thing was certain. If she chose to reveal her true ability, nothing would ever be the same again. The week of the school performance approached slowly, yet for Mira, each day felt heavier than the last. Every morning she walked through the school gates with her bag slung over her shoulder, pretending everything was normal. But inside her mind, the same question repeated again and again. Should I play the simple tune, or should I show them the real piece? Even she didn't know the answer yet. On Monday, in music class, the teacher reminded everyone to finalize their pieces. Some students practiced small melodies on the classroom piano, while others whispered about which tune would be the easiest to get done quickly. Most of them didn't care much about the assignment. They saw it as something to survive, not something meaningful. But for Mira, music wasn't just a task. It was a part of her life, something that made her feel alive, something that carried her quiet hopes. She sat at her desk, listening as the teacher walked around the room, giving suggestions and adjusting finger positions on students who were practicing. Every so often, someone would glance toward Mira, probably waiting to see if she would get up and rehearse anything. But she stayed seated, her fingers tapping silently on the table, playing invisible notes only she could hear. A girl in her class giggled softly and whispered to the person next to her, "I bet Mira will play something like Twinkle Twinkle or something for little kids." The boy sitting beside her snorted. "Yeah, she looks like she learned piano from those apps for babies." Mira heard them, but she didn't react. She kept her eyes down, pretending she was focused on something else. She wasn't hurt. She was used to comments like that, but they did make her think. People had no idea what she was capable of. They assumed quiet meant unskilled. They assumed silence meant simplicity. None of them knew about the hours she spent at home, the techniques she practiced, the classical pieces she studied, or the passion she poured into every note. The teacher approached her desk. "Mira, have you chosen your piece? You'll play early in the program, so don't choose anything too long." Mira nodded. "Yes, I know." "Good," the teacher said with an approving smile. "Simple is best for you. Just aim for something clean." When the teacher walked away, Mira closed her eyes for a moment. She wasn't upset, but she felt a quiet frustration. Not because the teacher was trying to limit her, but because they genuinely believed she couldn't handle more. She realized that no one at school had ever asked her about music. No one ever noticed how her fingers moved. No one ever saw the confidence she had when she played alone at home. She wondered what would happen if she surprised them, if she walked to the piano and played the fiery piece that lived inside her heart. But then she imagined the nerves, the eyes, the pressure. She imagined her hands shaking, or forgetting a note, or losing control of the rhythm. Those thoughts scared her, and she felt her stomach twist. At lunch that day, she sat alone on her usual bench near the small garden. She often liked eating there because it was quiet and the breeze made her feel calm. She had her lunch box on her lap, but she didn't eat much. Instead, she kept thinking about the performance. A small butterfly fluttered onto the edge of her bench, and she watched it for a moment. Maybe she was like that butterfly, quiet, unnoticed, but capable of something beautiful if someone just paid attention. That night at home, Mira practiced the fiery piece again. Her mother listened silently from the kitchen, letting her daughter pour everything into the music. The room filled with fast notes, smooth transitions, and strong moments of passion. Mira was confident when she played at home. She didn't worry about mistakes. She didn't worry about people watching. She allowed the music to flow naturally. When the piece ended, she let out a long breath. She felt lighter, but the question still stayed inside her. Her mother walked into the room with a cup of warm milk. "You're thinking too much these days." Mira smiled softly. "I'm trying to decide what to play." Her mother sat beside her. "And what does your heart want?" Mira hesitated. "To play the fiery piece." "And what does your fear want?" her mother asked gently. "To play the simple one." Her mother nodded. "It's normal to feel both, but you must choose the one that lets you sleep peacefully the night before the performance." That sentence stayed in Mira's mind long after she went to bed. The next day, the school felt louder than usual. Students were restless, excited, joking around, making bets about who would mess up first. Mira watched them quietly, sitting at the edge of the music room, just observing. The teacher asked if anyone wanted to rehearse in front of the class, but no one volunteered. Everyone wanted to save their energy for the real day. During a break, one of the boys approached Mira, not out of kindness but out of curiosity. "So, Mira," he asked, "are you actually playing that simple tune? Or was that just something you said?" Mira shrugged. "I don't know yet." He laughed. "Well, don't go crazy. Don't try anything hard. You'll just stress yourself." Mira stayed quiet. She didn't have a reason to answer him. His words didn't matter, but the idea behind them stayed in her head. Later, in the hallway, another girl from her class said loud enough for others to hear, "I'm excited to see Myra's performance. It'll probably be cute." That made a few people laugh. None of them meant it in a cruel way, but the tone felt like they were patting a small child on the head. Mira went to her locker, feeling her heart beat faster. Not from fear, but from a feeling building inside her. A feeling she didn't recognize at first. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something else. Determination. A part of her wanted to prove them wrong. Not because she needed their approval, but because she wanted to show the truth. She wanted them to see the version of herself that existed at home in front of the old keyboard. The version that wasn't afraid to be powerful, expressive, or passionate. But even with this determination, the fear of messing up kept returning. What if her hands trembled? What if she hit the wrong note? What if her nerves ruined everything? That evening, after dinner, Mira went to her keyboard once more. She didn't even turn on the overhead light. She played with only the small table lamp shining on the keys. The room felt more peaceful that way. She took a deep breath and began. This time, she didn't focus on perfection. She didn't count beats or overthink. She simply played with emotion. Her fingers moved quickly, lightly, gracefully. The melody rose and fell like waves. Every second of it felt like speaking without using words. When she finished, her mother walked in silently and sat on the floor beside her. "Do you know what I see when you play?" her mother asked softly. Mira shook her head. "I see someone who doesn't need approval to shine." Mira felt her throat tighten. Her mother wasn't dramatic. She didn't give big speeches. But her words always reached Myra's heart. "You have something inside you," her mother continued. "Something rare. But the world won't know unless you let it see." Mira looked down at her hands. They weren't shaking. They were steady, strong. For the first time, she realized something important. The fear she felt wasn't a sign that she shouldn't play the fiery piece. It was a sign that she cared deeply about it. And when something mattered, fear always came with it. But courage could come too. The night before the performance, Mira lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet. Her mother was asleep. The soft hum of the fan filled the room. She thought about every whisper, every assumption, every moment she was underestimated. And then she thought about the music she had practiced for so long, the music that made her feel powerful. She knew she had to choose. She couldn't go on feeling torn. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes. And finally, she decided. She wasn't going to hide her talent anymore. She wasn't going to let fear control the moment. She wasn't going to play the simple tune. Whatever happened tomorrow, whether people stared, whether her hands shook, whether she surprised the room or not, she would play the fiery piece. Not for applause, not for validation, but for herself. She fell asleep with a calm mind, knowing that the next day would change everything. The morning of the performance arrived with a strange kind of stillness in the air. Mira woke up before her alarm, something she rarely did. She lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the soft sunlight touching the edge of her blanket. Her mind wasn't foggy, and her heart wasn't racing. Instead, she felt something calm inside her, like she had already crossed the biggest hurdle just by deciding. The decision itself had lifted a weight from her chest. She was going to play the fiery piece. As she got dressed, her mother watched her with thoughtful eyes. Mira wore her simple school uniform. Nothing special, nothing flashy. But her mother noticed a subtle change in her daughter's expression. A small confidence. A spark. "You look ready," her mother said gently. Mira nodded, tying her laces a little slower than usual. "I think I am." Her mother placed a warm hand on her shoulder. "Remember, play for yourself, not for them." These words felt like a shield around Myra's heart. On the walk to school, Myra's hands felt cold even though the sun was already bright. She rubbed them together, trying to warm them up. She wasn't scared, not in the same sense as before, but she was aware of the importance of the moment. She knew today mattered for her in a way no test or assignment ever had. When she reached the school gates, everything looked normal. Students talking loudly, teachers giving instructions, kids running around. No one knew what decision she had made. No one knew what she planned to do, and that, strangely, made her feel stronger. Inside the school building, the hallway buzzed with excitement. Students were gathered in small groups, talking about their pieces, comparing which one sounded easiest, and joking about who would accidentally hit a wrong note. Some were nervous. Others didn't care at all. When Mira entered the music room, a few people glanced at her, but she slipped quietly to her seat. She placed her bag under the chair and folded her hands in her lap. Her fingers tapped lightly on her thigh, practicing the rhythm of the piece in silence. As the teacher walked in, the room slowly settled down. "Good morning, everyone," the teacher said with a cheerful tone. "Today is our class performance day. Remember, this is not a competition. Just play comfortably and do your best." Some students nodded. Others looked half asleep. Mira sat motionless, absorbing the moment. "We will go in the order I assigned last week," the teacher continued. "And Mira, you will still be near the beginning as planned." A few students exchanged amused smiles. Mira knew what they were thinking. They assumed she would play something tiny and simple, something forgettable. She didn't respond. She simply breathed in and out calmly. When the teacher dismissed them to the hall, the group moved like a noisy swarm. Mira walked slowly, slightly behind the others. She could hear bits of conversation around her. "I'm gonna play the easiest thing ever. Just want it done. Hope no one messes up so badly that it becomes awkward. Imagine someone trying a big piece today. That would be funny." And then someone whispered, not quietly enough, "Do you think Mira will even reach the end without stopping?" Mira pretended she didn't hear. The school's small auditorium wasn't fancy. It had wooden seats arranged in rows, a slightly creaky stage, and a piano placed at the center. The piano itself had scratches and marks from years of use, but it still worked fine. To Mira, it looked inviting, as if it were silently calling her name. Parents weren't invited, so the audience was made up of students from other classes, a few teachers, and some staff members. The room filled quickly, students chatting loudly until the teacher clapped their hands. "All right, let's begin." The performances started. One by one, students walked up to the piano, played their short pieces, bowed awkwardly, then rushed back to their seats. Most performances lasted less than a minute. Some students played confidently, others hesitated. Some forgot notes. Some played with shaky fingers. A few created funny moments that made people giggle harmlessly. Mira watched every performance carefully, not to compare, but to mentally prepare herself. She noticed how the room reacted to each tune, how the audience didn't expect anything great, how they were simply waiting for the event to end. When it was nearly her turn, she felt her chest tighten for a moment. Not from fear, just from the weight of knowing her moment was close. She wiped her palms on her skirt and took a slow breath. Then the teacher called her name. The room barely reacted. No whisper, no excitement, just mild curiosity, as if nothing important was coming. Mira stood, her legs surprisingly steady, and walked toward the stage. Her steps were soft but purposeful. She climbed the two small wooden steps and approached the piano. The air around her felt different somehow, quieter, heavier, expectant. She pulled out the bench gently and sat down. For a moment she didn't touch the keys. She just looked at her hands. They weren't shaking. She placed them in her lap and exhaled slowly. No one in the audience knew what she was about to play. They expected something short, something simple, something that matched the quiet girl they thought they knew. Mira lifted her hands and placed them lightly on the piano keys. She closed her eyes. The audience waited for a gentle melody. But the moment her fingers pressed down, everything changed. The first burst of notes filled the room with a bright energy that made several students' heads snap upward instantly. It was nothing like the simple tunes they had heard so far. The sound was bold, fast, and intense. So unexpected that a hush fell over the entire hall. Mira didn't look up. She didn't need to. Her fingers moved with a confidence no one had ever seen from her. They glided across the keys with speed and strength, hitting each note with perfect timing. The fiery melody rose and fell like a storm, each section filled with emotion that seemed too big for such a quiet girl. The room stayed frozen. Students who had joked earlier now stared with open mouths. The teacher stood completely still, eyebrows raised in disbelief. Even those who didn't understand music could tell that Mira was playing something incredibly difficult, something far beyond anything expected in a school performance. But Mira wasn't thinking about them. She was lost in the music. The melody carried her. The rhythm guided her. The piano became an extension of her heart. Every note she played told a story she had kept hidden for years. A story of quiet nights practicing alone, of dreams she never said out loud, of emotions she couldn't express through words. Her fingers moved faster, swirling through the most complex part of the piece. Her hands crossed over one another gracefully, dancing over the keys with a skill far beyond her age. The sound filled every corner of the room with passion, warmth, and fire. No one whispered. No one laughed. No one blinked. Some students leaned forward without realizing it. Others sat frozen, afraid to move because they didn't want to miss a single second. The teacher covered their mouth with a hand, stunned. As the piece reached its final section, Mira's fingers slowed for a moment, softening the melody, then built up again into a powerful, dramatic finish that echoed through the hall like a final burst of fireworks. Then silence. Deep, complete silence. Mira lifted her hands from the piano and placed them gently on her lap. She didn't look up right away. She breathed out softly, feeling a lightness wash through her chest. She had done it. She had played the piece that lived inside her heart. When she finally lifted her head, the room was still frozen. Dozens of eyes stared at her. Not with confusion, not with judgment, but with shock. Mira blinked, unsure of what would happen next. Then, somewhere near the back, someone began to clap. Slow, hesitant, unsure. Then another person joined, and another, and then the entire hall erupted into applause. Loud, long, and full of amazement. Students who had whispered about her stood up. Teachers looked at each other in disbelief. The sound of clapping grew stronger, filling the room with warmth. Mira sat still, her cheeks turning slightly pink. She didn't know whether to smile or cry, so she simply bowed her head politely. In that moment, everyone in the room knew one thing. The quiet girl they thought they understood was someone entirely different, and her music had just told them a truth they would never forget. When the applause filled the room, Mira didn't know how to react at first. She had expected confusion, maybe silence, maybe a few claps out of politeness, but she never imagined the sound that rose around her. Loud, full, almost overwhelming. It echoed through the auditorium, bouncing off the walls like rolling thunder. Students who barely noticed her before were now standing. Even some teachers had tears in their eyes. For a moment, Mira felt like she wasn't in her own body. It was as if she were watching herself from far away, the quiet girl sitting on the piano bench while everyone around her clapped as if she had done something unbelievable. But she had shown them who she really was. After a few seconds, the applause softened into a steady rhythm but didn't stop completely. Mira finally stood, bowed her head gently, and walked off the stage. Her legs felt light, almost like they weren't fully touching the ground. She tried to walk normally, but her steps came out small and uncertain. Every pair of eyes followed her. She returned to her seat, and a few classmates moved aside to make space, even though there was enough already. Their faces were glowing with disbelief. One of the girls leaned toward her and whispered, "Why didn't you ever say you could play like that?" Mira lowered her eyes. "I didn't think it mattered." "It mattered today," the girl said quietly. Someone behind her added, "That was insane. I mean, in a good way. You were like, wow." Mira didn't know what to say. Compliments weren't something she received often, and now they were coming at her like waves. The teacher walked back to the front of the room, still looking stunned. When they finally spoke, their voice trembled a little. "That was extraordinary, Mira. Truly extraordinary." Mira gave a small nod. The teacher cleared their throat. "Let's continue," they said, though even they seemed unsure how. The performances after Myra's were shorter and quieter. Students played their simple tunes, but the atmosphere had changed. The audience wasn't giggling or whispering anymore. Everyone seemed more focused, more respectful. The mood had shifted in a way no one could deny. When the final student finished, the teacher dismissed the class to take a short break before returning to their regular schedule. Students rose from their seats, but many didn't immediately rush out. Instead, they gathered around Mira in small clusters, their voices soft with admiration. A boy from the class said, "That piece, it looked so hard. How long did it take to learn?" Mira shrugged lightly. "A while. You played like someone who's been doing this forever," another student murmured. Mira didn't correct them. She had, in a way. As students filtered out of the auditorium, some smiled at her, some nodded, and some simply stared. It was as if everyone was trying to understand how someone so quiet, someone they had overlooked, could carry such powerful music inside her. Mira left the hall slowly, holding her bag close. She didn't walk with her head down as usual. She didn't hide behind the crowd. She walked in the open, and surprisingly, she didn't feel shy. Felt new, strange, but good. In the hallway, she overheard students from other classes talking. "Did you hear about the performance? Someone said a girl played a professional level piece. Who was she? I think her name is Mira." Hearing that made Mira smile softly. Not a big smile, just a small curve of her lips. But it was enough. When she reached her classroom, some students clapped again jokingly as she entered, but it wasn't mocking. It was friendly, light-hearted. They were trying to show appreciation in their own awkward way. Mira sat down, trying to focus on the lesson, but her mind kept drifting back to the performance. She had never felt anything like it. The thrill of the moment, the surprise on everyone's faces, the sudden shift in how people saw her. It all felt unreal. But the most surprising part of all was how she felt inside. Free. Like she had finally allowed the world to see the part of her she always kept hidden. During lunch, she sat in her usual spot near the small garden. But this time she wasn't alone. Two girls she barely spoke to before approached her with shy smiles. "Can we sit with you?" one of them asked. Mira nodded. They sat beside her, opening their lunch boxes. At first, the conversation was quiet, gentle. "Your piano playing was beautiful," one girl said. "Thank you," Mira replied softly. "Have you ever thought of performing outside school? Like competitions or something?" Mira shook her head. "No, I just play at home." "Well, you should," the other girl said with certainty. "You're really good." Mira listened quietly. She wasn't used to such attention, but she didn't dislike it. She just didn't know what to do with it yet. More students walked by and waved at her. Even students from the upper classes, who normally ignored younger kids, looked at her with clear interest. Word was spreading quickly. Later that afternoon, when the bell rang, Mira packed her things and walked toward the exit. The day had felt long and short at the same time, full of new experiences, new reactions, new emotions. When she stepped outside, she found her mother waiting near the school gate. Her mother had taken a different shift so she could pick her up early, something she hadn't done in months. Myra's face lit up. "How was it?" her mother asked with a curious smile. Mira hesitated for half a second. Then, quietly, she said, "It was good." Her mother raised an eyebrow. "Just good?" Mira looked down, unable to stop a small smile. They liked it. Her mother nodded knowingly. I'm sure they did. As they walked home together, Mira told her mother everything. The applause, the surprise, the whispers, the reactions. She didn't boast. She didn't exaggerate. She simply shared what happened, in her soft, honest way. Her mother listened with pride filling her eyes. Mira, she said gently, you opened a door today. A door to what? To possibilities. Mira thought about that all evening. The next day, school felt different. When she walked through the hallways, students greeted her. Some asked questions. Some simply nodded respectfully. The teacher stopped her before class began. Mira, the teacher said softly, you have a gift. I didn't know. I'm sorry I underestimated you. Mira shook her head. It's okay. No, the teacher insisted gently. You showed us something incredible. If you're open to it, I want to help you grow your talent. We have a school showcase coming up next month. Would you consider performing? Mira blinked. A showcase? Yes, students from different grades perform for the whole school. And sometimes local music teachers attend. Mira felt a flutter in her chest. I don't know. I've never performed like that. You did yesterday, the teacher said with a warm smile. And you were brilliant. Mira didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to praise, especially not from a teacher who once believed she should stick to simple tunes. I'll think about it, she said softly. The teacher nodded. That's all I ask. The rest of the day, Mira moved through her classes in a quiet haze. Her classmates kept asking about the piece she played, what it was called, how long she had practiced, if she could play other difficult melodies. Mira didn't brag or show off. She answered humbly, keeping her voice soft. But something inside her felt different. Stronger. She could feel the change like a warm light in her chest. Later that evening, she sat at her old keyboard again. Her mother was cooking dinner in the kitchen. The familiar hum of the appliance filled the room, along with the quiet calm of their home. Mira placed her fingers on the keys and played softly. Not the fiery piece, not tonight. She played something gentle, something slow, something warm. A melody that carried the feeling she had in her heart. Hope. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if she would perform at the showcase, or if this moment would lead her somewhere new. But she did know one thing. She wasn't the same quiet girl she used to be. She was still quiet, yes. Still kind. Still gentle. But now the world had seen her hidden strength. And Mira had realized that being quiet didn't mean being invisible. Music had given her a voice, one louder than she ever imagined. The hall remained unbelievably quiet for a moment after the last note faded. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty at all. It felt full. Full of shock. Full of awe. Full of something no one had expected to feel that morning. Mira sat there with her hands still resting on the piano keys, her chest rising and falling as she tried to catch her breath. For someone who had been invisible most of the school year, she had just taken up all the space in the room, without trying, without forcing, without even speaking. She had done it through music alone. Then, almost like someone pressed play on an invisible remote, the room burst to life. A wave of applause rose suddenly, loud and powerful. It wasn't polite clapping. It wasn't the type people give just because they're supposed to. This was the kind that came from deep inside people, the kind they gave only when they had been moved, shaken, surprised. Some students stood. Others shouted her name. A few kids kept staring at the piano, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. And at the front, near the corner of the hall, Mira saw her mother press both hands to her face, tears slipping through her fingers as she clapped harder than anyone else. The sound of the applause washed over Mira like warm water, but she didn't smile yet. She looked almost frozen, like she wasn't sure it was real. She had imagined this moment so many times while practicing late at night on her old keyboard, the moment when someone, anyone, would hear what she could really do. But imagining something and seeing it unfold right before your eyes were two very different things. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. She wasn't used to people cheering for her. For a second, she simply stayed seated, not moving at all. The music teacher, who had been standing near the side of the stage, seemed unable to move too. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes wide. He had heard hundreds of performances in his career, some good, some bad, most ordinary. But nothing prepared him for this. He had expected a simple tune. Something small. Something safe. Something forgettable. What Mira played instead was the kind of piece people remembered for a long time. The kind that shook the room awake. Finally, Mira stood slowly. And when she did, the crowd grew louder. She didn't bow dramatically or lift her hands in the air. She simply gave a small nod, almost shy, almost unsure, like she didn't want to take too much space even though she had earned it. She stepped away from the piano carefully. As if walking out of a dream, she wasn't sure she was ready to leave. Her classmates stared at her as she came down the steps. A few students who had laughed earlier couldn't even look her in the eyes now. Others watched her with a kind of admiration they had never shown before. Two girls she rarely talked to whispered something to each other, glancing at Mira like she had suddenly become someone worth knowing. It wasn't the kind of attention she chased, but it was the kind of attention she had silently hoped for her entire life. The kind that said, "We see you now." As she walked toward the front row, her mother stepped into the aisle and wrapped her arms around her. It wasn't a quick hug. It was long, tight, emotional, the kind that said more than words ever could. Her mother's voice shook as she whispered into her ear, "You did it. You really did it." Mira rested her head on her mother's shoulder, letting herself breathe in the moment. The music teacher finally recovered enough to move. He made his way toward Mira and her mother, his face still showing complete disbelief. When he reached her, he didn't begin with a question or a compliment. Instead, he let out a soft laugh. Not the kind that makes fun of someone, but the kind that escapes when someone has just witnessed something unbelievable. "Why didn't you tell us you could play like that?" he asked. Mira looked up, her eyes warm but still shy. "I wasn't sure anyone would want to hear it," she said quietly. The teacher shook his head in disbelief. "Mira, people would travel miles to hear what you just played." She didn't know what to say to that. She simply lowered her gaze and gave a small, thankful nod. Other teachers came over too, each one offering their praise. One said they had never heard anything like it in their entire time working at the school. Another told her she had a gift she should never hide again. A younger teacher from the art department said she had goosebumps the entire time. Every word felt unreal to Mira, like she was hearing them from underwater. Students soon gathered around her. Some came to congratulate her. Some apologized for ever treating her like she was less than them. Others simply stood nearby, hoping to be close enough to say they witnessed her performance firsthand. It was overwhelming, but Mira tried her best to stay calm, to answer politely, to not let the sudden attention swallow her whole. As the crowd slowly settled down, the teacher asked Mira if she could stay behind later so they could talk about something important. She agreed, though she wasn't sure what he wanted to discuss. For now, she just wanted to sit beside her mother and breathe in everything that had happened. The remaining performances continued, but nothing matched the energy Mira had left in the room. Even the students who played well seemed a bit nervous, knowing they were stepping onto a stage that had just been set on fire. Some played too fast, others made mistakes, and a few admitted later that they had been too distracted thinking about Mira's performance to focus on their own. When the event finally came to an end, parents slowly moved toward the exit while students chatted excitedly about what had happened. Everyone kept mentioning Mira's name. They talked about how her fingers flew across the keys, how she looked so calm yet so powerful at the same time, how the music seemed bigger than the stage. Someone mentioned uploading the video they had recorded, and soon others said they had captured it too. Within minutes, several students were already sharing clips online. Mira didn't know any of this yet. She stayed seated quietly with her mother, enjoying the last moments of the morning. In some ways, she felt lighter than she ever had before, like something inside her had finally been allowed to breathe. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing. The girl who had walked into the hall that morning wasn't the same girl walking out. When most people had left, the music teacher approached again and asked Mira and her mother if they could step into his office. They followed him down the hallway, passing bulletin boards and classroom doors. Everything felt strangely different to Mira, as if the school itself was looking at her in a new way. Inside the office, the teacher sat across from them and leaned forward with a thoughtful expression. "Mira," he began gently, "what you did today wasn't just impressive. It was rare. Very rare." She listened quietly, her hands resting in her lap. "I've been thinking about this for a long time," he continued. "But after today, I'm sure you need to be somewhere that can shape this talent. Somewhere that can push you. Somewhere that recognizes potential like yours." Mira blinked slowly, unsure where he was going. Her mother glanced at the teacher, worried and hopeful at the same time. "Are you saying she needs special lessons?" she asked. The teacher nodded. "Yes, and not just regular lessons. I want to recommend her to a youth music program. They only take a few students each year, and they look for young musicians who show extraordinary ability." Mira fits that exactly. Her mother's eyes widened. Myra's mouth parted, but no words came out. "It won't be easy," the teacher added, "and there will be challenges. But I believe Mira is ready. More than ready." Mira finally spoke, her voice soft. "Do you really think I could do something like that?" The teacher smiled. "After what we heard today, absolutely." Her mother reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "If this is something you want," she said, "I'll support you completely." Mira looked between them, feeling a new warmth spread inside her. A different kind of fire. It wasn't the fire of fear or pressure. It was the fire of possibility. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, her future had just opened up in a way she never expected. She nodded slowly. "I want to try," she said. The teacher's smile widened. "Good. Then this is only the beginning for you." As they left the office, walking out into the sunlight, Mira felt lighter with every step. The school hall behind her still held the echo of her performance. The applause, the shock, the joy, it all lived in that moment. But now, a new feeling lived in her heart too, the sense that something far bigger was waiting ahead. When Mira stepped outside the school building that afternoon, the world felt strangely different. The sunlight seemed brighter, the breeze felt gentler, and every sound around her, cars passing, birds chirping, students chatting, felt more alive than usual. She walked beside her mother quietly, but inside her chest, a warm, fluttering feeling kept rising and falling. It wasn't nerves. It wasn't fear. It was something new. Something she wasn't sure she'd ever felt so strongly before, hope. The moment they reached home, her mother insisted she rest for a while. But Mira couldn't sit still. She walked into the small living room, stood in front of the old keyboard with its chipped edges and missing key covers, and gently placed her fingers on the plastic keys. She didn't press down, didn't play a note. She just let her hands rest there, thinking about everything that had happened in a single day. A simple school performance. A hall full of people she never expected to impress. A teacher who suddenly believed in her future. A chance to join a program she had only heard about in passing. It was almost too much to take in. For years, she had practiced quietly, late at night, hoping her efforts meant something. And now, all at once, the world seemed to be telling her that yes, it did. Her mother came up behind her and rested a hand on her shoulder. "You were incredible today," she said softly. Mira nodded. "It still feels unreal." "That's because big moments always feel unreal at first," her mother replied. "But you earned every part of it." They shared a quiet smile before her mother stepped into the kitchen to prepare dinner. Mira remained by the keyboard, her thoughts drifting back to the faces she had seen that morning. The shock, the surprise, the respect. She had never seen people look at her that way. She wasn't used to it, but it felt good. More than good. Felt right. Her old keyboard wasn't in perfect condition, but it had carried her through every step of her journey. She pressed a few keys gently, watching as the worn-out letters flickered in the faint light. The sound wasn't clear and polished like the school piano, but it still carried memories, practice hours, and late-night determination. She began playing softly, not a fiery piece this time. Something calm. Something that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. A gentle melody filled the room, floating toward the kitchen where her mother hummed along while chopping vegetables. felt peaceful. It felt like the world was finally giving her space to breathe. Later that evening, after dinner, her mother told her she had called her uncle, who lived in another city, to ask if he knew anything about the music program the teacher mentioned. Myra's uncle wasn't a musician, but he knew people who worked in different fields. He had promised to find out more information by the next day. Mira nodded gratefully. She didn't know what the program required or how hard it would be to get in, but for the first time, she wasn't scared of trying. She felt ready. The next morning, when she reached school, something she never expected happened. People actually turned toward her the moment she walked in. Students who usually barely noticed her existence were suddenly greeting her, asking how long she had practiced, complimenting her performance, or telling her they had watched the video again and again. She felt embarrassed by all the attention, but she also felt proud. It wasn't the kind of attention she had dreamed about. It was better. It was honest. Later in the day, her teacher called her to the staff room. When she walked in, he was sitting at his desk with a laptop open in front of him. He motioned for her to come closer. "I want you to see something," he said. Mira leaned over slightly. On the laptop screen, there was a video of her performance, uploaded by a student the day before. But that wasn't the surprising part. The surprising part was the number under it. Over 90,000 views. Her heart skipped. "That many?" she whispered. "And it's still climbing," the teacher said with a smile. "People are sharing it everywhere." Her throat tightened. She didn't know how to react. The idea of thousands of people watching her play felt overwhelming, but also wonderful. In the comments below the video, people from different countries had written things like, "Who is this girl? This is unbelievable. She plays with so much passion. This is not a simple school performance. This is talent." Her eyes softened as she read each comment. She had never expected strangers to care about her music. "Life changes in strange ways," the teacher said quietly. "Yesterday you were a quiet student in the back row. Today you are someone people around the world are talking about." Mira let the words sink in. That afternoon, while she was walking out of school, a group of younger students ran up to her. One of them, a small girl holding a music book, looked up at her and asked shyly, "Can you teach me how to play like that one day?" The question caught Mira completely off guard. No one had ever asked her for guidance before. She smiled gently, bending down slightly so she could meet the girl's eyes. "You can play like that," she said. "You just have to keep practicing. Even when no one sees. Even when it feels hard." The little girl nodded with bright eyes. And just like that, Mira realized something important. Her music wasn't just hers anymore. It was touching other people, inspiring them, encouraging them. It was more powerful than she ever imagined. That evening, her uncle called with the information he promised. He explained that the youth music program was highly selective, accepting only a handful of talented students each year. The application required a performance video, a written form, and a personal recommendation from a music teacher. Mira immediately thought of her teacher at school. She knew he would help. Her mother listened carefully and asked if they could apply. Her uncle said it might be challenging, but Mira definitely had a chance, especially now that her performance video was gaining so much attention. After the call ended, Mira sat on the couch feeling both nervous and excited. This was not a small step. It was a big one, a step toward a future she had only dreamed about. Her mother sat beside her and placed an arm around her shoulders. "No matter what happens," she said softly, "I'm proud of you. Today, yesterday, and always." Mira leaned against her, grateful. That night, she sat again in front of her keyboard and began practicing the piece she had performed at school. This time, she played with a different heart. Not a nervous heart, not a tired one, but a hopeful one. She imagined what it would feel like to play on a new stage, with new people, with new opportunities around her. A week later, after going through the entire application process, Mira submitted her forms and video. Her teacher wrote a heartfelt recommendation letter describing her talent, her discipline, and the emotion she brought to her music. Her mother double-checked every detail. And Mira, she simply waited. The waiting was hard. Every day felt longer than the last. She kept checking her email even though she knew the results wouldn't come early. But waiting also gave her time to reflect on everything that had happened. She realized that even if she didn't get selected, her life had already changed. People saw her now. Her music was heard. Her story had begun. 3 weeks later, an email finally arrived. Mira stared at the notification for almost a full minute before she found the courage to open it. Her hands trembled slightly as she clicked the message. Her mother stood behind her, her breath held. The first word in the email made Myra's heart stop. "Congratulations." Her mother gasped softly. Mira reread the word again and again, her eyes filling with tears. She had been accepted. Only a handful of students from across the region had been chosen, and she was one of them. Her mother hugged her tightly, crying with joy. Mira cried too, overwhelmed with relief, pride, and disbelief. It felt like every late-night practice session, every quiet moment, every doubt, and every dream had finally come together in one beautiful moment. Later that evening, she received a message from her teacher. "I knew you could do it." And she realized something important. This wasn't the end of her story. This wasn't even the middle. This was the beginning. Her performance at school wasn't just an unexpected surprise. It was the spark that lit the path to her future. From a simple tune to a fiery masterpiece. From a shy girl to an artist ready to take on the world. Myra's journey had just begun.